This man was hunting in the woods one day when he came face to face with a menacing bear in dire need of help. John knew he had to act fast. He approached the bear slowly, speaking to her in a soft tone and showing her his empty hands. The bear seemed to understand and didn't attack. John could see the pain in the bear's eyes, and he knew he had to help her. With some makeshift tools he had in his bag, John managed to remove the dead cub from the bear's womb. The bear was grateful and licked John's hand. She then walked away, and John could see the relief in her eyes. After that day, John's life changed. He realized that his love for healing was still there, and he wanted to help not only people but animals too. He studied hard and became a veterinarian. He moved to a new town and opened his clinic, where he treated both domestic and wild animals. One day, a year after the encounter with the bear, John was called to a nearby forest to treat a wild animal. When he arrived, he was surprised to see the same bear he had helped a year before. She had been injured by a trap set by a hunter, and she was in terrible pain. John could see the recognition in the bear's eyes when she saw him. She didn't growl or attack him but lay there, waiting for him to help. John worked for hours to remove the trap and treat the bear's injuries. When he was finished, the bear stood up, looked at John, and then walked away. John felt a sense of satisfaction and contentment. He had not only saved the life of an animal, but he had also gained her trust. The next year, John received a strange gift. It was a bear skin rug with a note that read, "Thank you for saving my life. I could have killed you, but I didn't. I remember your kindness, and I will always be grateful." John felt a sense of pride and gratitude. He had not only gained the trust of a wild animal, but had also made a friend. From that day on, John continued to help both people and animals, and he became known as the village's animal whisperer. He had gained a new appreciation for life and had found his true calling. John knew that his actions towards the bear a year ago had determined what the bear would do to him now. He had gained the bear's trust, and in return, the bear had spared his life. The bearskin rug became John's most prized possession, not because it was a gift from the bear, but because it symbolized his newfound purpose and his connection with nature. John knew that he would never forget the lesson he had learned from the bear. He had learned that kindness and compassion could change the world, one animal at a time. Once again, John found himself in the midst of a challenging situation, just as he had years before when he helped deliver a bear's cubs. This time, however, he was alone and injured, lying at the bottom of a ditch several feet deep. He tried to move, but the pain in his leg was too intense. For a moment he panicked, thinking that he might die alone in the woods. But then he took a deep breath and focused on his training as a doctor. He knew that he had to stay calm and assess his situation. After a few minutes he realized that he had a compound fracture in his leg. He also realized that he had lost his phone and that no one knew where he was. He needed to find a way to get help, but he couldn't move. As he lay there, he started to feel the cold creeping into his bones. He knew that he had to find a way to keep warm. He looked around and saw that there were some branches and leaves nearby. He managed to crawl over to them and began to build a small shelter. It wasn't much, but it would help to keep the wind and snow off him. He also knew that he had to stay awake and alert. He had heard stories of people falling asleep in the snow and never waking up. As the hours passed, John struggled to keep himself warm and awake. He tried to keep his mind occupied by thinking of happy memories from his life. He thought of the day he helped the bear deliver her cubs, and the way she looked at him with gratitude. He thought of the day he opened his own medical practice, and how happy he was to be back doing what he loved. He thought of his wife Brenda, and how much he loved her. Eventually he started to feel sleepy. He knew that he had to stay awake, but he couldn't help it. His eyes grew heavy, and he felt himself slipping away. Just as he thought he might fall asleep, he heard a noise. It was a soft growl, and it was coming from somewhere nearby. He opened his eyes and looked around, but he couldn't see anything. Then he heard it again. This time it was louder. He realized that it was a bear, and it was getting closer. He tried to move, but he was still too weak. He knew that he was in danger, but he couldn't do anything about it. Suddenly he saw a shadow moving towards him. It was the bear, and she was carrying something in her mouth. As she got closer, he saw that she was carrying a blanket. She gently laid it over him, then curled up next to him. John could feel the warmth from her body, and he knew that he was going to be okay. For the rest of the night, John lay there, snuggled up next to the bear. He knew that he was lucky to be alive, and he was grateful for the bear's kindness. In the morning, when the sun rose, the bear got up and walked away. John knew that he would never see her again, but he would always remember her. After a few more hours, a search party found him. They took him to the hospital, where he received treatment for his broken leg. When he was released, he returned to his medical practice, but he was a changed man. He knew that he had been given a second chance, and he was determined to make the most of it. From that day on, John made it his mission to help as many people and animals as he could. He volunteered at the local animal shelter, and he started a program to help low-income families get access to medical care. He also made a point of spending more. As the sun began to set, John realized that he had lost his way in the woods. It was getting dark, and he had to find his way back home before it was too late. He walked on, hoping that he would find his way, but in the darkness he missed the rock that tripped him. He fell and felt a sharp pain shoot through his leg. He tried to get up, but his ankle was badly twisted. John knew that he was in trouble. He shouted for help, but there was nobody around. He knew that the noise could attract predators, and he didn't want to risk it. But he had no other choice. He started to shout, and after an hour of screaming, his voice became hoarse. He began to lose hope. He was in so much pain, and the cold was getting to him already. Even though he dressed relatively warmly, his jacket and boots wouldn't keep him protected from the harsh cold and the wet ground beneath him. John started to lose consciousness, but he was startled awake by a loud thud in the distance. The thuds became louder and closer, and John began to panic. He thought that a predator had finally found him, and in this state he was practically free dinner. John thought about his wife Brenda and his mother, and how heartbroken they would be when they found out that he had been mauled by a wild animal just hours after he promised he'd be back soon. The doctor soon realized that the thuds were the footsteps of something huge, and he was terrified. As he looked up at the edge of the ditch, he saw a menacing black bear staring at him hungrily. Just as the black bear was about to leap into the ditch, a large figure flew past and pushed the black bear out of sight. John heard a lot of growling and fighting, and after several minutes, the forest became quiet. Still thundering in his chest, John gasped when he saw a grizzly bear appear. It had an old wound across its eye and stared back at him. Immediately John knew that this was the bear he had helped all those months ago. The mother bear jumped into the ditch, followed by two smaller bears, most likely the ones he'd helped her deliver that day. She began sniffing at him, and all of a sudden, started licking his face. John was paralyzed with fear, and wondered if she remembered him at all, or if she planned to eat him. Before he knew what was happening, the bear lifted John out of the ditch by grabbing his collar with her teeth, and laid him on the ground a few feet from where the black bear lay unmoving. Taking her in closely, John confirmed that it was indeed the bear from that day. It was a miracle. The grizzly nudged John and watched him struggle to get up. She moved closer to him, allowing him to lean on her for support. Together they slowly made their way out of the woods with the two cubs in tow. When they got to the border of the woods, John expected the bear to turn around and disappear again. Instead, she led him to his house where his wife and mother were waiting and worried. At first they were frightened by the three bears until John explained. His mother then realized her son hadn't been hallucinating after all. As they all watched the bear and her cubs run back into the woods, they knew it was a story they would tell for generations to come. That was the last time John ever saw his old friend. What do you think of this amazing story, and what would you do if you ever encountered a bear in the woods? Let us know in the comments.